Very good. So thank you everyone for joining us today for this event, Shattering the Mass of Darkness, which is a combined event for Rainbodhi LGBTQIA Buddhist Community and the Therigatha Festival. So many of you will already know Rainbodhi. Rainbodhi is a spiritual friendship group, and we welcome everyone, regardless of race, gender, sexuality, ability, financial status, whether you have faith or no faith. And we're a group that really affirms the LGBTQIA Buddhist community. And we advocate for more inclusion and diversity in Buddhism and in the broader community. So that's Rainbodhi. And what about the Therigatha Festival? Some people who are tuning in perhaps might not even have any clue what this word means, Therigatha. And I was looking at some of our YouTube videos that have already been uploaded for the festival, and I saw that YouTube doesn't know what the Therigatha Festival is either, thinking that it was the Theri guitar, as in the instrument festival, which is kind of funny. And so no, it's not about a guy called Theri who plays guitar. It is about the Theris, who are the enlightened nuns that we have verses from, who lived around the time of the Buddha and who were usually people who spoke verses celebrating their own enlightenment. And these women's voices are the earliest collection of literature by women in the world. And they tell us the stories and lives of these amazing women who came from all different backgrounds. They were rich, they were poor, they had a variety of roles. Some were slaves, some were sex workers, they were mothers, they were unhappy wives often, and they were people who came from all areas of society, all layers of society. And the one thing that unifies them as a group, as a collection of verses, is that they all attained enlightenment. And these verses celebrate that enlightenment. So what the Therigatha Festival has been doing is bringing some awareness to these women's voices, to make them more available, to connect them with the Buddhist community. It's one of those things that seems to happen in religion. Women's voices often end up marginalized. And so we're trying to recenter those voices. And that's what the festival has been doing with a variety of talks, interviews, and panel discussions. And really delighted to have Rainbodhi involved with this today. In a few seconds, I'm going to ask Letty to do an acknowledgement of country. But before that, I just want to acknowledge the importance of queer people, trans people, discussing these verses. Because although it's not stated explicitly, I'm pretty sure that there were some queers back in the time of the Buddha, and perhaps even some of the Theris themselves might have identified as queer. And we have evidence of same-sex attraction, trans people from the times of the Buddha, but it's just good for us to bring our own voices to these voices, and we can have a conversation across time with these incredible women from the past and think about what it means for us to live in a Buddhist way, what it means for us to think about the things that these women experienced and talked about, to apply our own life experience to the things that they discuss, to make it real for us. And so that's what this event is, I guess, trying to do today, is to bring to slightly queer the Therigatha and to respond to it in voices that come from us, but have a conversation with those voices from the past. So that's a little bit about why we're here. And I'd like to invite Letty to deliver the acknowledgement of country.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Bante Kaliko is beautiful. Thank you so much, and for your work in organising the Therigatha Festival. And yeah, I just wanted to begin by acknowledging that wherever we're meeting from today, particularly if we're meeting from the country of Australia, but many of us, hearing the different locations that you're coming in from around the world, many of us are meeting on stolen and unceded First Nations people's lands. And I'm in the Blue Mountains today, so I'd like to acknowledge the country that I'm on. So I'd like to specifically acknowledge the Darug and Gundungurra Nation people. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And I'd like to extend that respect to any First Nations people who may be with us today around the country, and First Nations people from around the world. The sovereignty of this land, First Nations people's land, was never ceded. This is, was, and always will be Aboriginal land. And part of that, I'd also just like to say that no matter where we are around the world, that Black lives matter, that Indigenous lives matter, that people of colour lives matter, and that lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, gender diverse, intersex, queer, and asexual people's lives matter. And I'd like to invite all of us just to take a moment as well, just to extend that a bit more, and just to think about the infinite number of his stories and her stories and they and their stories of LGBTIQA plus pride and love throughout human history. And Bante Kaliko mentioned a little bit of that history in our Buddhist history as well. But just to extend a bit of gratitude to our LGBTIQA plus leaders, elders, older people, the people that came before us, many of whom are Black, Indigenous people of colour as well. And many people who we don't know their stories and we don't know their names, but we know that they stood for love. They stood for love for themselves, for people that they loved, for our rights as LGBTIQA plus people, and for future generations of queer, trans, and intersex people. So I warmly welcome all of you here. Thank you so much for being here. I'm very, very honoured to be sharing this space with you, and really looking forward to the discussion. So thank you.
And thank you, Letty, for that acknowledgement. So another acknowledgement I'd like to make is that today we're going to be talking about bodies. And one thing that I'm really, I really want Rainbodhi to make sure we do every time we do an event is to make sure that it's a safe space for everyone to come along. And so in this discussion about bodies, today I'm particularly concerned for people who are gender diverse or non-binary, trans, who might find the discussion of bodies sometimes a bit challenging, a bit difficult. So some of the poems by the Theris can be pretty hardcore Dhamma. And sometimes they're talking about the revulsion of bodies, or they're talking about their bodies, falling apart and being unhappy with parts of their bodies. And I know that this is an experience that many people have. We hear about gender dysphoria. We hear about people hating parts of their bodies. And so I want you to be able to, today, when you listen to this talk, to try to keep that in balance. We're not going to change the words of the Theris. We're not going to alter their histories, but we're just going to have to hold that in balance in a way that we understand that this is how they were talking about their bodies. We can think about how we talk about our bodies. And I just want to warn you that we're talking about some parts of the bodies, and that if this is challenging for you, try to sit with it for a bit. If it's really challenging, then it's okay just to turn the volume off, take your headphones off, and just have a few moments to breathe and come back. And the reason I mention this is because we want to be really careful about how we present these teachings. One reason is to remember that even the Buddha back in the day, when he was giving a talk to monks about the repulsiveness of the body, which was a talk designed to overcome lust, which is something really important for the Sangha, for the ordained Sangha, people who are working to overcome sexual desire, especially. When the Buddha gave a talk about the disgusting nature of the body, some monks ended up killing themselves. And they're like, get rid of this body. And so this is when the Buddha kind of came back and said, okay, well, you can do breath meditation instead. And so we have to be careful. Even a great being like the Buddha had to learn how to position the teaching in a skillful way. And so for this discussion about bodies, please remember that we're not trying to talk about bodies in a way that is harmful, but we're trying to talk about bodies in ways that bring balance, that are useful for us to come out of suffering. That's the whole point. And so with that in mind, I want to invite one of our dear friends, Rosie, to give us a guided meditation using one of the poems from the Therigatha by Ampapali. Ampapali was a fascinating woman from the time of the Buddha. She was a courtesan, a sex worker. She was a very beautiful woman. She was a powerful woman. She could command an extraordinary rate for her services. And she was a very generous person, a kind person. She donated land and requisites to the Sangha. And she was also a very meritorious person and someone who had wisdom to see the truth of the Dhamma. And so Ampapali is a fascinating character. We have quite a lot of stories of her in the suttas, in the discourses, and we have some references to her in Theri Apadana, which is the later stories of the Theris. And we also have her verse here in the Therigatha, which is one of the longer verses. And in this verse, she's talking about old age, so falling apart of bodies. So just remember, no matter what body we have, no matter how much we like it or don't like it, our body is going to get old and it's going to fall apart. And this is what it means to have a body. Anybody that is born gets old. And so this is what we're going to hear about today for our meditation. Meditating on old age was one of the frequent reflections that the Buddha encouraged us to do, to reflect upon the nature of this body, to inspire a sense of acceptance and also urgency, knowing that time is running out. How are we living our life? Being infatuated with beauty and youth, how does that affect us when we start to lose it? How do we identify with this body? And what does that mean for our sense of self and how we live our life? So, Rosie, if you're ready, please unmute and I'll ask Ben to share the screen so that Rosie can read. And for everyone else, I invite you to let Rosie give the instructions, but this is a guided meditation, so feel free to get comfortable or close your eyes. So thank you, Rosie.
Thank you very much, Bhante. It's such an honor to be with you here today. I am Rosie, an American trans woman living in New Mexico. I'm 70 years old and fond of saying that I was born trans before trans was a legitimate identity. Arriving on the planet during the time of Christine Jorgensen, who was America's first transsexual woman. I am old enough now to have seen us make great progress in identity liberation. Though much work needs to be done, and for that ongoing effort, I am truly grateful for the work of Bhante Akaliko and Rainbodhi. The subject we are here to read about, discuss, of course, is the inevitability of aging. And to me, old age is not the time to regret the past, nor fear the future. Yet it is the perfect time to see how the past or how karma has brought us to this point in our age, and to continue to prepare for the inevitability of death by practicing the Eightfold Path. As for me and my personal experience of aging, I was born with childhood asthma, which has taken a turn for the worst in the last couple of years. But asthma has helped me to understand that in a very real sense, breath is life. I also have experienced osteoporosis, plantar fasciitis, Graves' disease, hyperthyroidism, cataract surgery, and recently had my cornea scraped. So it seems to me that much of this old age is like waiting for the next organ to fail. Of course, it's my brain that thinks it's waiting for those other body parts to expire because my brain still thinks it's 30 years old. I know this for a fact because when I wake up twice a night to go to the bathroom, my brain takes the opportunity to cuss out my bladder. I hope that's not too much information. I looked long and hard for a brief quote in the suttas regarding aging, but I found most of them too long to be useful here. Through this research, though, I think that I can sum up the process by saying a few simpler things. This process of aging is a perfect example of impermanence. In a process called samsara, most humans repeat the same cycle. We are born, we ascend, we descend, and then we die. We are like beautiful waves formed from the ocean that rise up to kiss the shore, and then return to the sea, and we are waves no more. And now, before we begin these readings, I ask you take a moment to ground yourself in kind of a meditative state by feeling your bodies in the present, your feet perhaps firmly on the floor or wherever they are comfortable. Our shoulders and arms relaxed, ears open to hear, eyes gently closed to visualize as we breathe slowly, deepening into a meditative state. And I am honored to begin with this first poem by Ampapali. My hair was as black as bees, graced with curly tips. Now old, it has become like hemp bark. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. Crowned with flowers, my head was as fragrant as a perfume box. Now old, it smells like dog fur. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. My hair was as thick as a well-planted forest. It shone, parted with brush and pins. Now old, it is patchy and sparse. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. With plates of black and ribbons of gold, it was so pretty, adorned with braids. Now old, my head has gone bald. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. My eyebrows used to look so nice, like crescents painted by an artist. Now old, they droop with wrinkles. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. My eyes shone brilliant as gems, wide and deepest blue. Oh, ruined by age, they shine no more. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. My nose was like a perfect peak, lovely in my bloom of youth. Now old, it is shriveled like a pepper. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. My earlobes were so pretty, like lovingly crafted bracelets. Now old, they droop with wrinkles. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. My teeth used to be so pretty, bright as a jasmine flower. Now old, they're broken and yellow. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. My singing was sweet as a cuckoo, wandering in the forest groves. Now old, it is patchy and croaking. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. My neck used to be so pretty, like a polished shell of conch. Now old, it is bowed and bent. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. My arms used to be so pretty, like rounded crossbars. Now old, they droop like a trumpet flower tree. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. My hands used to be so pretty, adorned with lovely golden rings. Now old, they are like red radishes. The true word of the truthful one is confirmed. My breasts used to be so pretty, swelling, round, close, and high. Now they droop like water bags. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. My body used to be so pretty, like a polished slab of gold. Now it's covered with fine wrinkles. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. Both my thighs used to be so pretty, like an elephant's trunk. Now old, they are like bamboo. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. My calves used to be so pretty, adorned with cute golden anklets. Now old, they're like sesame sticks. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. Both my feet used to be so pretty, plump, as if with cotton wool. Now they are cracked and wrinkly. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. This bag of bones once was such, but now it's withered, home to so much pain, like a house in decay with plaster crumbling. The word of the truthful one is confirmed. Thank you.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
My pleasure.
So thank you so much, Rose, for reading that. And they don't muck around, do they, these Theris? You'll see as we go along. Ampapali is not one of the only hardcore people talking about the body in this way, really coming to the reality of old age. And thank you for those reflections that you shared also, because the whole point of these poems is to create that link between their experience and our experience. You know, you said, you know, bits and pieces are falling off, and I start to see this in my friends. And that image that Ampapali gives of the house, parts of the house falling off, you know, our body is this house. And so this is what it's like. And as you said before, Rosie, thank you for sharing, you know, you're just waiting for the next organ to fail or something, you said. So yeah, appreciate that. And I appreciate your insights also as an older member of our community, and that we need to pay attention to our elders as well. We also have another poem by another sex worker coming up. And so it's interesting to think that sex workers were common at the time of the Buddha, just as they're common today. There doesn't seem to be any particular shame or moral hatred of people who are doing sex work. In fact, it seems to be the opposite. They were often celebrated members of the community. And the women who are involved in sex work seem to have a lot of autonomy and power and wealth. But of course, there was different levels of autonomy and different types of sex work. So Ampapali is kind of considered this high-class courtesan. The poem that we're hearing next is from Vimala, who is often regarded as someone who perhaps was had a lower base of power. And so I'd like to invite another friend from the US to read a poem that they've selected. So thank you, Amy, if you can unmute yourself, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about Vimala's poem.
Thank you. So I'm going to read the poem first and then share after why I chose it. Intoxicated by my appearance, my figure, my beauty, my fame, and owning to my youth, I despised other women. I adorned this body, so fancy, cooled over by fools, and stood at the brothel door like a hunter laying a snare. I stripped for them, revealing many hidden treasures, creating an intricate illusion. I laughed, teasing those men, revealing many hidden treasures, creating an intricate illusion. I laughed. Sorry, I read it again. Today, having wandered for alms, my head shaven, wearing the outer robe, I sat at the roof of a tree to meditate. I've gained freedom from thought. All bonds are cut off, both human and divine. Having wiped out all defilements, I have become cooled and quenched.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you. I really liked this one a lot. I felt a bit of a connection because there was a time in my life where I danced, but not to that kind of, in that area, but I was a club dancer. And I remember having those same entertaining thoughts of looking back at all the mischief of the past. But then now, where I am now, remembering how there was this fire in me that just kept consuming. And now, having experienced all that, yes, it was entertaining, but how life is now is much more satisfying. It's calmed down, it's cooled, and I feel quenched, I feel pleased. And it's kind of like a new rebirth from that past life. So I really connected with this one and it was really nice.
I really like the self-awareness she has, kind of talking about how she was the hunter. It's quite often you think of it as the other way around, that there's this kind of like predatory kind of people like hunting out sex workers, they're seeking out. But she was the one who laid this snare, and she could really see through her own charms.
Oh, totally. Yeah. It was
she
like a game.
Yeah, she knew. Yeah. But it's interesting to think that both of these women, I guess for a large part of their life, relied upon their beauty and relied upon, I guess, their youth and charms. You know, sometimes when I go to universities these days, I look at these people and I'm like, oh gosh, everyone here just looks so healthy. But then I remember they're just young. And so when we have these things like, you know, firm skin, good looks on our side, it's very easy to I guess use them and to identify strongly with them. I don't know, you seem like a pretty young person still. Have you started to experience the aging process?
Not, I get little creaks here and there, but it's like I find something to oil it out and it's okay. So I'm lucky in that sense, but I am experiencing it with my cats because they are senior cats. And it's sad. I'm like, oh no, it's true. This does happen, you know? But yeah.
Yeah, it is true. And it's unstoppable. And I think this
Yes.
is why the Buddha and all these Theris, these enlightened nuns, are asking us to focus on these truths so that we can actually recognize it for ourselves, so that we can accept it, not as something that we should take personally, but something that is natural, something that is out of our control, and something that has to happen. So it's often the resistance to aging, you know, the skincare, the Botox, the whatever we think will stop it happening. This is what causes us suffering, because we've identified so strongly with this idea of a youthful, healthy person. And because that identity is changing, it's not a safe place for us to have hope, you know? It's like you're hoping for an impossible thing. And if we identify so strongly with that, then we're only going to suffer. And so we see the relationship here between the identity view and the attachment and the craving, and how that causes suffering in our lives. And I think these two women realized that and broke through it and saw the truth. So thank you, Amy. I'm just concerned about time. We've got some more bodies, more talk about bodies coming up. And now I'd like to invite Sam, who is in Sydney, to unmute and to share her poem with us, which is Abhaya's mother. So thank you very much, Sam. And maybe Ben, you can share the screen. Thanks so much.
Thank you. My dear mother, I examine this body up from the soles of the feet and down from the tips of the hairs, so impure and foul-smelling. Meditating like this, all my lust is eradicated. The fever of passion is cut off. I'm cooled and quenched. So I thought of the role of motherhood, and also my earliest memories of my mother, who was very strong and capable and resilient. She was a caregiver and she ran our household. But then the roles were reversed and she became very frail and also very dependent on others. Then, of course, I am finding that I'm getting frail and I'm also losing confidence, both physically and mentally. Also, I think when I first read the poem, I thought of my very devout grandmother who would sit me down and tell me about the 32 parts of the body and how it was full of gunk and foul smelling. And as a 10-year-old child, I thought, well, yeah, okay, that's actually evidence-based. So yeah, I was quite grateful to her. And I think perhaps that's why from an early age, I had these feelings of samvega and, you know, unsatisfactoriness of this life and this body. And I sort of, perhaps that's why I opted not to have children, because I thought, well, do I want to pass on this again. So that was really good, sort of a good way to try to chip away at that ego. And I think spiritually, this poem, I mean, it's a short poem, but it's very powerful for me. And I think it's like a mini Maranasati or Asubha meditation. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the poem.
Thanks so much, Sam. And I think you're right. This is like a mini meditation. She starts off in the same way that Ampapali starts off, with this kind of scan of the body. In Ampapali's poem, we get the full list. She goes part by part. She talks about her beautiful hair. She talks about her poor eyebrows that are now sagging and how her voice has faded. And she goes down the body. And in Abhaya's mother's poem, we don't even get her name, just Abhaya's mother. We learn that she examined this body from the soles of the feet and down from the tips of the hairs, just like that, you know. So we can imagine her spending time going through these, as you mentioned, 32 parts of the body and scanning. This is what we were doing in Ampapali's poem, and this is what we do when we practice those 32 parts of the body. We're actually connecting with those internally and seeing them for what they are. So your grandmother sounds pretty hardcore. She sounds like maybe she would have written a Therigatha kind of poem as well.
Yeah, she was really very, very devout. And I had to sit for 1 hour with her every evening. My siblings would sit with me, but after about 5 minutes, they would just giggle and run away. But I felt this respect for her. So I had to sit for 1 hour, you know, say all the gathas in Pali, and then translate them into Sinhala. That's my language, Sri Lankan, from Sri Lanka. So yeah, it was a good grounding, even though she didn't live with us. Whenever we had school holidays, I would go and spend time. And yeah, so that was a good grounding. But yeah, she was hardcore for sure.
Hardcore, yeah. So I was just thinking of the importance of that lineage of women transmitting the Dhamma. And often our first spiritual teachers are women. And there's been this, you know, from your grandmother all the way back in Buddhism and beyond, and in all spiritual traditions, the place of women transmitting knowledge and spiritual concepts has been really, really important for the development of all spiritual traditions. And yet, for some reason, women get pushed aside pretty easily in these areas. Why do you think, I'll just ask quickly before we move on to the next one, why do you think we need to see these bodies as impure or foul smelling? What's the point of that?
Or just, I suppose, just the impermanence, you know, of life, and that this body is just a rubbish, you know, a whistle of rubbish, really. And yeah, just to understand that nothing is actually permanent, and that there's no concrete self. Yeah.
I think that for a lot of people who come to Buddhism, they hear this thing, like people talking about ugly bodies and impure bodies, and they're like, what's going on? This is kind of like pretty out there stuff, you know. And sometimes it's hard to work out why we would need to examine the body in this way. One reason is to, as Ampapali and as Vimala did, was to see through the identification with the beautiful. So often we look at bodies and we just see one side, which is the pretty, the handsome, the sexy, the lovely, and we kind of block out that other side, which is the smelly and the foul and the the reality of this kind of this thing that we drag around with us. So on one hand, having a body is really precious. Being a human is really precious, and we should totally love our body, whatever body we have. But if we become infatuated or obsessed or stuck with identifying with it, then we're going to suffer, because as you said, it's always changing. It's not permanent. And we can balance out that view that we have of it's only beautiful and bring it into balance with, you know, there's no such thing as only beautiful. Everything that changes is suffering. And there's no such thing as something that is only ugly. There's always aspects of beauty to things. So, but we try to bring this into balance. We don't kind of fall one way or the other, but that we see things as they are. And of course, the one reason we need to examine the body like this that really matters is because we want to become disillusioned with the body. In Buddhism, we talk about rebirth. Rebirth is suffering, this endless cycle of being born and suffering, getting old, getting sick, dying. This is a cycle of suffering called samsara. And it's by becoming disillusioned with having bodies that we can start to come out of participating in this cycle. So eventually, as some of these women say in the Therigatha, they've had their last body, that's it, you know, that no more bodies for them. And so this is one of the strategies. But of course, this is quite a high level of practice that we're talking about here, where it's very difficult to practice at this level. You know, when we're in a relationship or we're living the lay life and we have to go to work and maybe put a bit of makeup on, or we have to shave our beard or whatever, going to do a particular job, and we need to take pride in our appearance. All of these things kind of become a bit more of a negotiation. But remember, we're talking about renunciant women. So that's something I just want to emphasize here, that we don't all just have to go out and, you know, walk into work wearing our pajamas or nothing and stop using the shower or whatever to prove that we've, you know, we're Buddhist. But we need to just uncover what parts of our attachment to bodies lead to suffering. So thank you so much, Sam, for sharing that. And
Thank you.
we have, yeah, it's really nice to hear your thoughts as well. We have another poem now, again, on the body, and related perhaps to this poem by Abhaya's mother that Sam just read. And we're going to have Kyle read us the poem by Abhaya. Welcome,
you,
Kyle.
Bhante. Thank you, everyone. Well, I'm the daughter now, because earlier was my mother who is speaking the poems. So I would just like to say, Sam, because I've been such a long time never used the Sinhalese word, so Pohama is tutti. And also, I'm Kyle. I'm actually in Singapore right now. And just some of the things that, you know, I feel like, you know, I'm just so passionate about all these poems is because it's from women. And I do feel like I'm very inclined that there's this certain part of Buddhism that emphasize that, you know, being a woman can be enlightened as well. So I just love the fact that, you know, they put it so equally to, of course, not sure are they doing it in, you know, every Buddhist school, but just to know that from the history, women has always been part of this enlightenment beings. So that's something I want to share. And I will start reading my poems right now. Abhaya. The body is fragile, yet ordinary people are attached to it. I'll lay down the body, aware and mindful. Through subject to so many painful things, I have, through my love of diligence, reached the ending of craving. and fulfill the Buddha's instructions. Thank you, and for listening. One of the things that really caught my, you know how you always look at something, just the first sentences, the first sentence will just like immediately capture your heart. And that was for me, because when they said the body is fragile, I'm a cancer survivor. So, 6 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. I have to go through the chemotherapy and the radiotherapy. So that sentence, the body is fragile, just hits right through me, to know that how much we have taken this body for granted. I think this is why somehow we are also distracted by all this pleasure, but we've forgotten that, wow, one day it might fail. So for Rosie to say the next organ to fail, for me right now is waiting for the next side effect from the cancer to come. So just 2 months ago, I lost my hearing on my left hand side. So, but it was only for a while, for just a month, but it does makes you feel like, wow, this body is really fragile. So, but I want to bring it into a more, no, I don't want to say positive side, because this is logic, right? So for me, I just want to say that, in another way, it is a reminder, all this body that creates all these, fragile, vulnerable parts of it, they are just a timely reminder. And it has always been such a good way for me to remind myself, not to get too attached to this body. So this is something that I want to share, because I feel like most of the time we might be too negative about it. But for me, I feel like when this happened, it teaches me to be smarter in how I react to it, how I respond to it. So that's why I'm still happily, no one can tell that, I'm a cancer survivor. So that's why I think that brings out how I deal with it and respond to it. And also, I think, don't take this body too personally. This is one thing I've really learned, because I think so this is how I started to say this body, not my body, because when I use my body, it creates a certain kind of attachment to it. So this body, which I always use it, no, this is just this body, not my body. Because I realized that when I get too personal with it, it just becomes, it just have more problem, and I give more commentary whenever I felt something, and I will start to pity myself, and I would say, why is it me? And I was like, so then it was like, just this body is not functioning, not the mind. So this is something that I would like to share with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carl, for sharing that with us. And you're right, that first line, that the body is fragile, is very powerful. And she was able to see that. She talked about her diligence in ending craving and fulfilling the Buddha's instructions. What do you think she means by this word diligence? What is she talking about?
I think for me, if I could understand it correctly, that diligence is more like, the idea of seeing the truth. Once you see the truth, how do you practice it in the accordance to that truth? So diligence means that whatever she speak, whatever she think, whatever she do is according to the Dhamma properly. So that part of practicing it diligently. So that's what I felt, in terms of diligence.
I guess also one of the things that we need to do on the path is we have to use our body to see these truths.
Right.
And we have to, having
and
the body
somehow,
is better. Go.
Sorry. Oops. Yeah. And somehow we have forgotten that when Buddha, before he became Buddha, he saw that old age, sickness, and death is part of the triggering part of why he wants to become a Buddha. So that means that without this, there will be no Buddha. Without that reflection, there will be no Buddha. Without that reflection, there will be no enlightenment. So that keeps me always like a reminder as well.
And just as you were talking, the image that came into my head actually was the image of the fasting Buddha. Do you remember some of you might know the images of the Buddha when he was practicing these ascetic practices, where he was torturing the body by starving himself and living in the open air and really doing these practices which tortured the body. You see these images of him like really skinny, and you can see the bones of his rib cage, and he talks about how his eyes were like these sunken wells, that there was no gleam in the eye anymore, and that if you pressed his stomach you could feel the spine, and his bottom was like I think it's like a cow's hoof or something, and he was just this bony, gaunt, really tired looking person, and he discovered that that was the wrong way to treat the body, and that torturing the body doesn't actually lead to any good results. And I wonder what you think about that, because there's this kind of fine line between like realizing that the body is fragile and not getting too attached to it, and then the other time, especially when the body goes wrong, let alone because of our own actions, when the body goes wrong, how do we view it?
I know, I think it's a bit interesting because remember just now earlier you were saying that you can't wear pajamas to work, like how you need to find the middle path. Like there is a way to understand that we are still in this reality, even though we might know the exact reality, how it works. So I think it's about the middle path, and also knowing that this body is a kind of like a vessel, because we still can't meditate without our leg and hands and our body, right? So the mind has to be in somewhere else, like inside a vessel. So we can tune to how we take care of the body. If our intention was to use this body as part for our practice in good way for others, then that is the middle way. I think I can, see that body as a part of a supporting role, and then not getting too much. That means that I still need this body, but do I need to beautify my body to extreme in terms of obsession about it? Do I really need to put on a perfume, or the kind of thing? There's nothing wrong putting a perfume, it's just that the idea of how we can just know what this body is capable and not capable of, and find the balance in between them, and aim for fulfilling our goal or our intention. Example, like as for meditation, then, or for enlightenment, then I think that's where we can find that balance.
And it seems that when I talk to people who have had serious illnesses, life-threatening illnesses, that they often have a different approach to their own bodies and to the way that they live their life, also knowing that the body is fragile. And so it's perhaps this such ignorance that the body is fragile that allows us to kind of run around and get obsessed and spend all our time delighting in decorating the body, going shopping, doing all these things, but maybe not developing wisdom and seeing things clearly. So when someone perhaps has this experience that you've gone through as a cancer survivor, then maybe it's possible to develop a little bit more wisdom around it. So thank you so much, Kyle, for sharing that with us. And we'll keep moving along. We're moving away slightly from bodies and moving perhaps more into the realm of the mind and thinking about the process of enlightenment and what it means to, as these nuns frequently say, fulfill the Buddha's instructions. So next I'd like to invite our friend Sin to read the poem by Sama. Sin, if you can unmute, and we'll share the screen, and love to hear your thoughts on Sama's poem.
Thank you, Bhante. 4 or 5 times I left my dwelling, I had failed to find peace of heart or any control over my mind. Now it's the 8th night since craving was eradicated. Though subject to so many painful things, I have, through my love of diligence, reached the ending of craving and fulfilled the Buddha's instructions. Thank you for listening. I suppose when I read this poem, it reminded me of a personal experience that I had about 7 years ago. So if you allow me to share this specific experience that I had on a meditation retreat, I feel that maybe a lot of people can relate to it as well, because I've been on many retreats and even before that, but this particular one was profound. Because just to give you a bit of context, I had gone through lots of ups and downs in the past year leading up to it. And without really going into that detail about what happened before that, I wrote a death note, actually, thinking that I was going to die at the time. And obviously I didn't die, but I think that was an eye-opening experience. It turned out to be a panic attack, but I'd never experienced it before. So I thought I was going to die. And then I wrote a death note at the time. There was something that I'd like to talk about later on in regards to this, but this is not the main story. The main story is about the retreat that I went on. And I've only shared this with a few close friends of mine, but I have shared this story with Letty here in this group. So Letty, you'll have to listen to it again the second time. A few years ago, I went on this loving kindness metta retreat. And when Venerable Sama mentioned these lines in the poem, 4 or 5 times I left my dwelling, I had failed to find peace of heart or any control over my mind. To me, that line reminded me of exactly how I felt in the first 2 days of that retreat. Who knows what the mind was actually doing at the time? It's a mystery, right? But in those 2 days, I felt so agitated. I felt that I really couldn't cultivate metta or loving kindness in myself. Whatever I did at the time just seemed to go wrong. And I felt really frustrated. I couldn't generate love for myself and anybody somehow. I felt that if I did it, it was forced. So I spoke to my mentor at the time, who happened to be Bhante Sujato, leading that retreat. And he said, why don't you just forget about trying? Just maybe sometimes consider walking in the garden, or just forget that you're meditating, in quotation marks, but just accept and try to have a sense of letting go. And even if it feels mechanical, maybe just keep doing it. That's what he was saying at the time. And I tried, and it still didn't seem to work. But then I thought, okay, I just have to stand compassion to myself and not worry about the result, so to speak. Long story short, 2 days have gone past, and it was pretty similar. I mean, nothing much had changed. But then that particular night, I think on the 2nd or the 3rd night, I can't remember, there was I'm not sure if it was a full moon, but it was pretty bright. And I said to myself, I just wanted to sit a little bit, not worrying too much about feeling the love in myself, but just sit. And there was this instant feeling of calmness, even though I couldn't really generate love or anything like that at the time, but I felt like I was pretty peaceful, and I was just sitting under the full moon, under the full moon, and then I went to bed. So I made a conscious effort to just do it before I went to bed. But still, it was supposed to be a metta retreat, but I felt that I wasn't really able to generate that metta somehow. Well, the next morning we had breakfast together, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with some of the retreats where the food is always fantastic. And I know I've been on some retreats where, you know, the food was really bland because it was done on purpose because they believe it was distracting if the food was too delicious, but not on this retreat. The food was really delicious. And I must admit, honestly, sometimes on retreats, food is one of the things that I'm looking forward to. And that was probably the way, and that way as well. But so after the breakfast, I knew I was going to have lunch after that, which was going to happen pretty early, at 11 o'clock or something. But then I decided to meditate first, as usual. And right after breakfast, I started meditating. And you know how sometimes, even for 5 minutes, it feels so long, but then when the meditation is good, you know, 1 hour, 2 hours go past, and it feels like it is pretty short. And in that particular meditation, I felt that I was able to really observe the silence between, the gap of silence between the thoughts, as Bhante Sujata often said. And I was able to be with it a lot longer and sustain it, even though it's still, the metta didn't feel like, I wasn't feeling like I had, you know, I was filled with metta. It wasn't like that. But I was able to sustain that peace and that moment of silence for a longer period of time. And I felt really comfortable with meditation. And then I knew that I had meditated for a long time at that morning, because I smelled the food from the kitchen. So that was close to 11 o'clock. Yeah. And I thought, okay, I want to eat. I'm pretty hungry. But then I thought, no, I'm just going to keep going a little bit longer, because this is good. I feel good about it. That moment I started to feel, you know, the tingling sensation in my body and my heart. And I just try to be with it. And when this was completely unexpected, when I was about to end the meditation and get ready to eat, because that was my intention, suddenly there was this overwhelming feeling of joy, and I felt that the whole body was blanketed with this strange feeling of joy that I can't really describe. I was lifted up in the air, I felt. Then at that moment, I could hear the sound of the distant train in Bandanoon. It's so vivid. And I had overwhelming tears of joy that lasted for hours. It probably feels really strange, but I was in the toilet and everything felt beautiful in the toilet. I saw the butterfly in the garden and it was beautiful. The garden was beautiful. I was fully present, but I was like a little baby that has just, or maybe a child that has found an amusement park or something. It was really, really a bit over the top. But then for the next 2 days, I had a really much more subtle feeling of calmness, and I was truly in the present. And I really felt that at that point, I felt that I could actually die, and I was ready to let go. Of course, you know, I didn't feel that way again afterwards, but those 2 days, I felt I was really, really present, and I didn't really have many thoughts at all. And then I could relate to that experience that I had before the retreat, when I had that panic attack, when I wrote that death note. And after I wrote that death note, without going into too much detail about it, I actually said to my sister on the phone, I'm okay, you can let go. And I'm happy and I'm okay with it. And I had a similar kind of feeling at the time when I was ready to let go. So to me, when Venerable Sama said, now it's the 8th night since craving was eradicated, the last 2 days of that retreat felt that way to me. Even though obviously that was not the case, but I felt it was a very small glimpse of peace and and Nibbana, perhaps. I know it's just a very, very small glimpse, but to me that cemented my confidence and faith, or maybe Sada or Shadra in Sanskrit, correct me if I'm wrong, but that I know this is true because it's so personal and very profound to me. And that even that glimpse is enough for me to cultivate my confidence. And to me, I don't know about you, but Nibbana seems very mysterious sometimes. It's just unlike heaven, when you can imagine what it's like with all the beauty, because we operate from a sensory mechanism, right? But to me, Nibbana is about the dropping of things. It sounds so intimidating sometimes and scary, like going to the unknown. But having experienced that glimpse of peace, I just know and trust the words of the Buddha that whatever it is, it's unknown, but it's the real thing. And it's true. That's how.
Thank you, Sing. Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's true that unless we actually keep going, then we're not going to ever get to those stages that Sama describes. And so you talk about the peace, but for me, the part that really sings to me about that poem is when she leaves the hut 4 or 5 times. She's obviously frustrated, but then by keeping going back, she was able to get the result. And if you hadn't kept on meditating on that retreat, then you wouldn't have got that result either. So it's this cause and effect, so important. And thank you for sharing that personal story with us today. So we'll keep going along to our final poem, which is going to be read by Letty. So this poem is by the Venerable Arahant Citta Theri. And Letty, please unmute yourself and read the poem for us.
Thank you. And I just wanted to quickly say thank you to everyone who's shared your poems and your personal stories. I'm really very moved hearing what everyone shared and just being here. So thank you. Okay, so just because we're running out of time, I'll be very quick. Though I am skinny, sick, and very feeble, I climb the mountain, leaning on a staff, having laid down my outer robe and overturned my bowl, propping myself against a rock. I shattered the mass of darkness. So I adore this poem. I find it incredibly inspiring, quite electrifying, actually. Just very quickly, I think what I really love about this poem is that, touching on the themes that people have already spoken about, there's this recollection of the impermanence of a body. And I think there's this message that no matter what condition our body is in, or what our gender identity is, or who we are, we can all climb the mountain. We all have the capacity to realize, we can all become enlightened. And this shattering the massive darkness, which I see as, obviously that's enlightenment, that's, blowing up greed, hatred, and delusion, and the importance of, the path. To get there, we must renounce, we must give up. She gives up her outer robe, she overturns her bowl, she lets go of a lot to realize. So I find it immensely inspiring. I think there is definitely a way to introduce a queer reading into this. I think there's queer liberation embedded in this poem, but I'm just going to drop that in there and because I know we need to wrap up, but it's beautiful.
No, don't drop it. No, don't drop it in there and leave us hanging like that. We've got a few minutes. Please tell us what you meant by that.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, that was going to be a bit easy, wasn't it? Just to, but I think the theme of liberation. So yes, that we can shatter the massive darkness or the massive greed, hatred, and delusion, but the queer liberation, the queer and trans liberation in that is that we as a collective in solidarity with each other are also through who we are as people, we are also shattering the massive darkness or greed, hatred, and delusion with love, with our love for each other, and that liberation and further liberation is possible. So that's my queer reading of the poem.
And thank you very much for bringing that queer reading to the verses. And one of the things that really resonates with me in this poem is that she's skinny, sick, and feeble, still climbing a mountain.
Yes.
Good on her. And despite being, or maybe because of being skinny, sick, and feeble, she sees through that mass of darkness and is able to shatter it. And I just have this, it's a very powerful image. I mean, this is what poetry really does. It condenses an emotion and it condenses an image. And here she is so skinny and feeble, I just, on the top of a mountain, you can see her, yeah? You can see her. And there she is, despite being so skinny, feeble, and sick, you know, becoming enlightened, and she shatters it somehow, even this skinny, sick, feeble woman. So thank you very much for sharing that. So
Thank you.
Thank you to all the presenters, actually. Thank you very much for taking the time to read the poems and to get to know the poems better and to respond in your own words from a very personal place and share your responses with our community here today. Really appreciate you all doing that. And I really appreciate that now there's some more people in the world who have knowledge and understanding of these incredible voices of women from the ancient past and who share an understanding of the wisdom that they had, and that we can all apply this wisdom in our life. So let's finish off there with the recording. And thank you to Ben for being our Zoom master. Thank you for everyone in the crew and the audience who came along today, and all those watching at home. You do belong, and you are valued, and you are loved. And we can dedicate the merits of this time that we've had together today, all the good Dhamma we've learnt, all of the wisdom we've absorbed, and we can dedicate the merits of our practice, thinking may all beings have such wisdom. May all beings shatter the darkness. May all beings become enlightened.